Greetings and welcome back to room 303, Senior English B, and we now turn to Francesca Beard's Old Love in your MyPerspectives volume on page 520. Let's introduce ourselves to Francesca Beard, born 1968, grows up in Penang, Malaysia. She became a London-based performance poet after working at a variety of professions. By the way, I'm reading on page 517. Beard has spent many years touring with her one-woman show called Chinese Whispers. She's also spent significant time working as a workshop facilitator in creative writing and poetry. Now let's talk a little bit about Old Love and background information. As a performance poet, Beard writes poems that are meant to be both printed and performed on stage. She stated that her poetry, quote, is so much about audience. It's a very interactive art form. It always has an improvisational quality to it, end quote. Beard's work is often multidisciplinary and experimental. Now I want to set you up for this poem. It's an amazing poem, and I want to ask this question for your notes right away, so write it down. What is the extended metaphor that Beard is playing with in this poem, Old Love? Okay, and we'll be working now with a glance in a mirror as well, and we'll immediately think about Sylvia Plath's famous poem, Mirror. We'll play around now with this notion of what is it like to lose a friendship or a relationship or a lover that one has known and then one must somehow be apart from. What's that like? Let's see how we could work through this poem, okay?
Old Love by Francesca Beard.
In the glance of a mirror, I saw a timid shape standing in the beveled bed, the thin prismatic strip on the edge of the frame, and thought it was a ghost of you. What are you doing here? You can't just appear without warning, like we were used to it being. You seemed blurry, like the first and the last time, in between how huge you were. The shadow you cast let much sleep beneath its shade. You wavered in the air, vanishing. How I wanted to hold out my hand, so that your sad ghost could crawl into a friendly cradle. Of course it was nothing, a trick of the light, and a splinter in the eye of a hair gummed across the heart. No, you are frozen where you were that last time, deaf and dumb, a waxwork in the Pinhole Museum, while your tiny, passionate soul, marooned in the middle of nowhere, cries and stretches out its arms. Meanwhile, on my own rock, on the other side of the world, I think of you, blind and stumbling in the dark, while the rescuers throw the beams of their torches into the wrong cave.
Now let's work through this poem. We'll start, as we often like to do at 2B, with the rhetorical. Notice that we've got a poem of 3, maybe 4 stanzas, okay, that allows us to kind of ask the movement in each of these 3 or 4 stanzas. The break at line 17, 18 suggests that maybe that's not actually a stanza break, it's just that way in our text. Notice we begin with a glance in a mirror, and what it is that's seen. A timid shape standing right at the very edge, a ghost of you. And notice the poem is then written directly to the lover, the ghost, and then the question at line 5. What are you doing here? Notice it's not were, it's what are you doing here? You can't just appear without warning like we used it to be. That is to say, why is it that you've come back? What is it that all of a sudden, bam, and we know this, right, at 3B. We know this in our own life experiences, that the thing that sometimes we're missing will all of a sudden show up in the strangest moments, right, in the bizarrest ways. Here looking at oneself in a mirror, and then all of a sudden, bam, right there at the edge of the mirror, there's the image of the person that one loves. The shadow you cast let much sleep beneath its shade. That is to say, there's all kinds of history that goes in that very moment along with this vision. You wavered in the air, back to the ghost imaging, vanishing. How I wanted to hold out my hands so that your sad ghost would crawl into a friendly cradle. Some have read this as the lover has been lost to death. Others that the lover has simply lost the distance. We'll get to this final idea at the end of the poem, right? Of course, line 15, as if consoling oneself, it was nothing, and then the dash will make us think again at 3A of Emily Dickinson's use of the dash. A trick of the light and a splinter in the eye of a hair gummed across the heart. This, I think, poem can easily be read as influenced by the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson sharing some of these same kind of sentiments. That is to say, the loss of one and then to have to somehow reclaim that. The splinter in the eye, it's a compelling image, and then a hair gummed across the heart, another powerful image that Beard is playing with. And then the word, no, which does remind us a lot of Dickinson's poetry. No, you are frozen where you were the last time, deaf and dumb, a waxwork in the pinhole museum, while your tiny passionate soul, marooned in the middle of nowhere, cries and stretches out its arms. Now the symbolism, of course, is compelling. If we're talking about the death of the lover, that's obviously we can interpret it that way. Or it can just be that the speaker of the poem had to leave the physical presence of the lover, and now, as the speaker will say, meanwhile, on my own rock, that is to say, kind of set out in the middle of on the other side of the world, which leads one to maybe read this poem as the speaker had to leave the lover and go to another part of the world. I think of you, blind, this will be back to our splinter in the eye, and stumbling in the dark. Now we get this powerful cave imagery, while the rescuers throw the beams of their torches into the wrong cave. In other words, finding will never actually take place. That is to say, this is a lamentation on loss, and it's not coming back. And that makes this poem really a powerful one, especially when one reads the title. So let's begin there, 2A. What do we mean by old love? This old love can mean lost love. It can mean, of course, no longer available love. And it can, of course, mean broken love. No question. The word old works on multiple levels. We've mentioned it to be the profound effect of the way in which the poem is set up by looking into a mirror, and yet we end the poem with blindness, right? Okay, it's that juxtaposition of paradoxes. For you at 3A, what are the poems that come to mind here? We think of Yeats's classic, When You're Old. What for you are the titles that come to mind that so powerfully, poignantly capture the idea of what it means to lose the love that one has and try to deal with that loss, knowing that it can't come back? And then finally at 3B, for you, can you relate to this poem in some way? The person in your life that you most cared for, that you no longer have around you, for whatever reason. What is that like? And then what's this word picture about rescuers dropping the beam of their light into the wrong cave? It's like there's no getting it back. What's the time in your life when this happened for you, and you lost a relationship and you recognize there is no coming back, there is no getting it back? And how do you deal with that? I hope that this study of old love is going to lead you to more of Francesca Beard's amazing stuff. Thank you.